she would have had enough points to win.
So what color was your pee? It's black.
So
As black as my soul? Are you pointing at me and my soul?
Interesting. You think Brent has the capacity to beat Matt?
100%.
Really?
He's proven it.
White Walker's ridiculous. Let me get on my dragon.
All right.
All right.
Now
Sweet.
onto what we must talk about.
What must we talk about?
The Game of the Thrones.
Oh.
If she had just finished that workout, she would have had enough points to win.
So what color was your pee? It's black.
So
As black as my soul? Are you pointing at me and my soul?
Interesting. You think Brent has the capacity to beat Matt?
100%.
Really?
He's proven it.
White Walker's ridiculous. Let me get on my dragon.
All right.
All right.
Now
Sweet.
onto what we must talk about.
What must we talk about?
The Game of the Thrones.
Oh.
If she had just finished that workout, she would have had enough points to win.
So what color was your pee? It's black.
So
As black as my soul? Are you pointing at me and my soul?
Interesting. You think Brent has the capacity to beat Matt?
100%.
Really?
He's proven it. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to Scale as Needed. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this very special episode of Star Wars as Needed.
Yeah.
All right, so here's the deal. We recorded just a few days ago.
Yes.
Last episode. We're going to take a little bit. We're going to maybe take next week off for
Christmassy
time.
times.
Probably.
Yeah, probably.
Maybe also for New Year's times.
But then we'll be in full swing in 2018.
Probably. Well,
Probably, guys.
Cliff and I are going to be out of town for the first week or so. Whatever. We'll figure
I
it
will
out.
be here by myself.
This is all very exciting pod,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
the fact of the matter is, fitness doesn't matter when a Star Wars movie comes out. So
Yeah.
I just want to say goodbye to our controller, Kai. See you later, Kai. Kai hasn't seen Star Wars yet. This is going to be an all-spoiler, all no-holds-barred Star Wars The Last Jedi talk.
Although there is some fitness that pertains to it, I must say. Did you see Adam Driver's pecs?
Yes,
Good
dude,
Lord,
there
those are
is
some enormous
definitely
pecs.
some
He
some
has
fitness.
big chunky titties.
He's very wide. He was a
Yes.
very broad human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I mean, originally I think he was always been quite that broad, but
Yeah.
he's been very skinny.
I've seen the first series of Girls there. He
Yeah.
was always broad, but he did not have those pecs.
But he didn't have those pecs, and
Yeah.
he
Yeah,
now has
he had
pecs.
Not
some
even.
kind of pecs.
Not even when he was a Marine.
So that's right. He was a very awkward looking.
He was a very
human
awkward
being.
looking
was-
teenage Marine, like most Marines.
So here's the deal, gentle folk.
Yep.
I'm gonna do a 10-second. We're going full spoilers.
Summarization of what Star Wars is for the uninitiated.
I'm just gonna go. Spoilers are fucking starting soon. If you haven't seen this movie and don't want it ruined, because we will ruin it,
Yes.
stop listening in 3, 2, 1. Spoilers commence now. Luke Skywalker dies.
Yeah. He sort of dies.
sorta dies, I
guess.
He becomes one
disappears.
with the Force, as you do.
He was just projecting his image so hard that he just got tired.
I don't know where to start with this movie.
Well,
Oh,
just
that's right.
start.
You have the wrong opinion. I forgot.
Trust your feelings.
Do I have the wrong opinion
Yeah,
of this
you do,
movie?
buddy.
Let's be totally honest here.
Uh-huh.
That wasn't that great of a movie.
I am with you.
Yeah, pretty much.
There
I'm with
were
you. Aw, fuck
there
all
was
you guys.
so much wrong.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I have mixed feelings about the film. I have mixed feelings about the film because there's definitely some shit in there that I liked. However, I ultimately found the thing to be yet another kind of, disappointment that I would say better than Force Awakens, kind of net positive, but ultimately another big disappointment in this new trilogy. But the problem is there's a lot of negativity about the film. I just don't, all of my negative feelings have nothing to do with the negativity that's out there about it. Because a lot of the criticism out there seems to be that it doesn't feel like Star Wars, or there's things that feel inconsistent with how Star Wars has been up to this point. I could not give a shit. Like, the things I like, quite frankly, about it are the things that feel the least like Star Wars, or that introduce the most of the new things and blah, 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 blah. My objection to it is it's just another kind of clumsily slapped together script that doesn't quite, it feels a bit half-baked and a bit of a first draft. And this time the problem is further compounded by it being another overwritten, overwrought Ryan Johnson movie kind of being added into the mix, where there's a lot of plot that kind of ultimately adds up to a completely forgettable story that I even now am struggling to recollect and haven't thought about once since then, like Looper.
Remember the super compelling subplot where What's-His-Head and the Asian girl go to a whole casino planet, and then they do the racing things, and then they're little kids, and they eventually come back.
And Poe Dameron had some stuff to do so that he could be on screen for a while, and ultimately it's just and then some things happened with Luke Skywalker. I don't know. It just, again, the whole thing felt overly plotted and added up to nothing, which is kind of how I feel about Looper and the rest of and Brick and all of Ryan Johnson's movies. It very much felt like a Ryan Johnson movie in that it was very dense and forgettable.
There's a couple things that... Okay, so my very first reactions after the movie finally finished...
What, you mean you didn't like that entire extra act that was added on post-climax? It's like when the movie was about to end and they were like, wait a minute, we need Hoth. And then they just went to Hoth.
The movie, my first reaction was that felt long, which is not how I wanted to feel. Yeah. What I wanted to feel was, man, I wish there was another 2 hours of this.
Yeah.
What I walked out of the theater feeling was, man, that felt long.
Yeah.
Like the first hour of the movie, I was just waiting for something to kick off. And I think in general, like, I agree with some of the stuff that you said. There were moments in that movie which were really fucking cool and really exciting, and I really enjoyed. But I also feel like, one, Ryan Johnson compounded the problems created by J.J. Abrams' mystery box of The Force Awakens, where he basically
he fixed a couple.
Well,
he brushed him under the rug.
Well, I'm sorry, not compounded. He didn't add to the problems. He was cornered by The Force Awakens because the only way that he could...
fucking point of this movie is getting rid of some of this.
By the way, let's not pretend that any of this has a point. But this is another thing that I really love is like reading some of the analysis and watching some of the analysis, and they're like, well, in the same way that the first film is all about kind of a meta commentary on Star Wars fandom and passing the torch, this film is about beginning to let go of the things that your father. Bullshit! Like this is a slapdash script that was clearly kind of thrown together to try and take what was essentially a cynical beat for beat remake and try and kind of force it and twist it and bend it into something new and kind of ignore certain parts and.
We sort of got a double remake of both Empire and Jedi.
Yeah, it was both Empire and Jedi, and that's. I mean, listen, that's cool. In that now Episode 9 has at least some room to breathe to create its own, to like finish this story in a way that makes sense to this story.
Yeah.
But it was really clear to me that. I feel like Ryan Johnson just felt like he needed to figure out something to do with whatever the fuck it was that J.J. Abrams left him with, which was basically just like, here's 8 fucking questions that no one can ever answer within an acceptable time frame. Good luck, motherfucker.
And honestly, to be perfectly honest, some of the things I liked most about the film was how much it just sort of took a lot of that and just threw it right out the window. Like, I love, we're in spoilers territory, I guess. I love that it never tried to explain who Snoke was and just killed him off. I love the fact, probably the thing that I hope that it commits to this idea. I love the fact that Rey is supposedly the child of just has no lineage, nothing. Yeah, exactly. All that stuff's fantastic. I love all that. It feels new. It feels fresh. It feels good.
Definitely subversive.
Yeah, it all feels great. And honestly, everything that happened in that one throne room scene with like the Snoke's throne room scene with Rey is fantastic. I love that sequence in itself is fine. That sequence in itself is great, and it's a shame that sequence is not only is it nested in a bunch of stuff that is kind of meaningless that precedes it, but then ultimately I think even what's interesting about that sequence is kind of undone by what follows it.
Right.
Because what follows it is almost immediately, it's like it would have been an amazing and surprising development if the Adam Driver character had actually turned towards good. It would have been a fantastic development that would have left me in a position of legit wondering, oh my God, I don't know where they're going to go with this story in the next episode. But
and they
then
immediately renege on that.
They immediately level set, which is fine. Clearly, that's what they wanted to do with it. And then we immediately return to kind of 45-minute kind of rehash of a sequence from Empire Strikes Back, which is the film that this is supposed to, I'll borrow George Lucas's word, rhyme with. And it's kind of like, that was a great sequence, and it would be fantastic if it was nested in a better movie than the one that it's in.
I mean, here's the thing. I saw it twice in a very short order for odd reasons. And my main takeaway watching it the second time is that there's a lot of things I was looking forward to seeing again. The throne room sequence, I was looking forward to see it and was excited to see that. I also, this is crucially important there, because I was drinking a lot of fluids during the movie, I knew where all the multiple times I would go to the bathroom would take place. And
you
it took
had
my
so
time.
many opportunities.
So many opportunities.
So many
and
opportunities.
Knew how to take my time.
There are dozens of minutes of that film that you do not need to be present for in order to appreciate its, its
very true.
entire thing.
And can we state this all pretty definitively that Benicio del Toro, can he just not be in movies
Can he just fuck off
anymore?
forever, please?
I really would rather not see him again in a thing.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing that I'm struggling with the most.
Uh-huh.
I fucking hate you guys so much, and I don't want to agree with you.
No, this is the worst because now I know what it feels like to be you.
It
It's
sucks,
the
doesn't it?
worst. It sucks so hard,
I just
man.
don't want to agree with you guys on anything, and yet. And I went into that movie so excited. I was like, on Tuesday morning, I'm going to motherfuck these assholes who are just gonna come over here and shit on this movie. And then I left it, and Katie was like, "So what did you think?" And honestly, the first thought in my head was, I don't know if I could defend a lot of this.
Yeah.
So here's the thing that I want to know, and I want you two to shut up for a minute.
Daniel, give it to me.
No, I actually want to know what your problems are because I know what their problems are, and I also know like the shift that happened after like we left the movie, and they were like, "Oh, it's cool," and now we're at the moment where these two are doing the predictable thing that they do and going, "I hate it," and it's terrible.
The other thing is like I stand by my reaction coming out of the theater, which is my reaction coming out of the theater is my reaction to every movie coming out of the theater, is that if it's mixed bad, I say it was fine because I don't want to rain on anyone's parade in that immediate good, the wonderful feeling you have when you leave a movie and you're still kind of enraptured by the music and the excitement and the images and the sounds. And the last thing I want to come out of the thing, and when I saw it with Kara and another couple, and Daniel and Cliff were there. And so so that was my reaction coming out, which is it's fine. But and given distance and given all of these things, my reaction remains the same, which is, that's the biggest thing I guess if I have one big objection to the whole thing is it yet again feels clumsy, slapshot, cynical, and slapped together, and that's frustrating because it's exactly what it is. You know that this script was written in a hurry because we know the context in which this film was made, and so you hope to kind of lose that awareness. And it's not. I didn't even necessarily go into this film with that awareness. I went in with kind of a lot of excitement based on all the positive reviews and ready for it to be good. And then I became very aware as I was watching it, like, oh right. What was I expecting?
Yeah, so here's some of I don't have an exhaustive list, Jamie.
Well, and that's the thing that I think is really interesting is like it's like I know their things and I know that we can't get into their things during the course of this podcast. It's not going to happen.
We sure can.
There's just not enough time.
We have lots of time. We have lots of time.
I think there's a few things that really stuck out to me. I don't agree with people who are necessarily like, oh, I don't like where you went with the characters. That's fine. Like, most of it could be justified based off of what we've seen in the past anyway. There are definitely some character decisions in there that are like, man, that's just fucking stupid. Like, basically everything, like killing off Akbar Admiral Akbar off screen.
Oh,
Okay,
no.
this is one of the
Terrible.
things that I think is like this has actually come back like a lot. When I was actually talking to some friends about this last night, and I had a friend who was like, and why the fuck did they kill Admiral Akbar?
Why did they?
And that's the thing. It's like Admiral Akbar is in like 3 scenes in the entirety of Star Wars.
That's totally fine.
And I'm glad you're attached to him, and that's great. That's why it should hurt when he dies.
Yeah,
That's
but
the other thing. And by the way, and I think a lot of these criticisms that people have, and it's the same thing we've talked about with criticisms of Game of Thrones or criticisms of anything else, is people feel that something's wrong. They can't articulate what's wrong about it, and so they latch on to something superficial. They can
like
latch on,
killing
I don't,
Akbar off
yeah,
screen.
I don't like how Luke died. I don't like that Admiral Akbar. They try and latch on
I
to
don't like
something.
how Luke was so unenthusiastic there. He
Exactly. And the thing is, what ultimately will result from this is that, I think that those kind of hot reactions will eventually cool, and what we'll be left with is another film like Force Awakens that we're just ultimately indifferent about.
So the things that bothered me most about this movie were, one, the Disney type of humor was a little too much for me. The whole joke in the beginning was fine. I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
But they played it off a little too long, and the longer it went, the more worried I was that that was going to be kind of the tone for the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
And then the moment we saw Luke drink the titty milk, I was fucking out. I was like,
That did
I
bother me.
can't.
That did
I was
bother
like,
me.
this is
That's
too.
not- yeah.
This is too fucking weird.
That did
Like,
bother me.
dude,
Honestly, the only moment that bothered me is the film had established such a cadence, and this is something that Marvel's criticized for, but Marvel has never been anything but this since Iron Man, so I don't mind it. Which is the moment of undercutting every single serious moment with a joke. And I'm not terribly attached to the tone of previous Star Wars films, but they at least had the confidence. The original trilogy had the confidence to occasionally take moments seriously. And there was the first moment where it really bothered me was when Luke first begins to try and teach Rey the Force, and she goes and she sits on the little pebble thing. Yeah, exactly. And he's like, and I want you to reach out. And like they begin to drift down the path. And even in anticipation, before the joke happened, I thought to myself, I really hope they don't undercut this moment with a joke. Like, I could feel it coming.
Yeah.
And even before she reached out with her hand or whatever the thing is. And I was just like, I really hope they just try and take this seriously for just a second. And then when they did the whole thing with the leaf and everything, it just bugged me. And it's just like, and it felt like a film that was, I'm glad they have the confidence to be funny. I enjoyed the humor in the opening thing, but it felt like a film that lacked the confidence to take itself seriously unless people were dying.
There were a couple things. There were a couple other things about it, like I had long text conversations about this, so that's why I'm kind of looking through my texts. My brother and a couple other people. Let's see. All right, so the whole Finn and Rose thing, I feel like was a complete waste of time. I thought Finn,
but Armin, it's part of the relevant themes of Star Wars. The themes, Armin.
I thought.
Remember, because this is a work of art.
Yeah, I left the film with no greater interest in Finn. I thought Finn was interesting at the end of Force Awakens. Like, oh, he's a deserter. He has but now he's part of the Resistance. Let's see what he turns into. In this movie, I felt like Finn's character had an opportunity to have an interesting arc, and then it was completely undercut and taken away by Rose, who's the other character who's, sort of like schlepped onto us, but like wasn't really presented in an interesting way. She was literally just there to only know science things and tell science things.
But here's the thing: is I don't like looking at any of these sequences in movies. Like, was that a waste of time, or was that because it's like if the sequence had been fantastic to watch and a delight and cool and not betrayed anything else and been exciting, it could have justified its own existence. That's the thing, is that how I feel about that whole sequence is it you can see, and you can even see what its intention was. You can see that it wants to broaden our idea of what the Star Wars world is. We want to see some additional perspective on, like, what is the context of the evil empire beyond just them being an evil empire? What does the Star Wars world look? And I think that all of those are admirable intentions. But the problem is those are fine intentions, but there's a huge gap between the intention to do that and what ultimately felt like an odd, silly, bizarre,
like the entire,
and not terribly satisfying sequence.
The entire casino world, the entire Canto Bight thing was, to me, felt more like the prequels than anything else. Like, it felt like...
Well, you're
right. You're right in a sense, in that, like, it's one of the first times in a while. Certainly, this never occurred in Force Awakens, that, like, we're seeing, unique shit happen.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, I don't mean that necessarily in, like, the worst of the prequels.
Well,
I just meant the prequels were really kids movies.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things, like, I keep hearing. Sorry, Cliff, but I keep hearing over and over and over again, like, the thing where it's like, yeah, Canto Bight feels like the prequels and all of that. And I'm not saying this is what you're saying, but, like, it's funny because, like, it's like, well, why? Why does it feel like that? Well, there's just so much CGI, and it's like, okay, guys, that's not. Well, and I'm not saying that's your argument.
That's not a real. Yeah, I think that people feel that.
Well, yeah. The reason it feels semi like the prequels feels a little bit like the '50s diner in one of the prequels. I forget which it was, where it's making too direct reference to pop cultural iconography from Earth, basically. And it had been a little more detached, had the little guy not been wearing a monocle and a tuxedo and putting gold coins in a slot machine, had that bit just detached a little bit from that.
Yeah, because, I mean, a lot of what Star Wars iconography kind of just marries kind of medieval and Japanese medieval iconography with kind of science with sci-fi kind of Flash Gordon iconography.
Right.
So it's a mixture of ancient Earth iconography with future-y shit, which is why 20th century Earth iconography, like the 50s diner,
feels out of place.
Feels out of place.
That's a
and
really
so when
good
you see,
observation.
So when you see tuxedos and stuff, that's where it's like, well, this doesn't feel Star Wars. And I felt like I was reading people who kind of clumsily pawing at it. It's like, because the 20th century Earth iconography
doesn't fit in with robes and lasers.
Doesn't fit in with robes and lasers.
And that makes sense. Like, I didn't even think about that.
And that doesn't even really bother me that much. I think it's another one of those superficial things where I'm like, yeah, I agree it doesn't fit, but I don't mind that they're going to try and expand the world. That's all fine. If it had been in service of something that didn't feel kind of tedious to sit through, then I would have enjoyed it. But it's like, pretty much around the moment when, it's like it's filled with the worst people in the world, and then we go to the thing, and it's the casino planet, and then Finn's running around just being a nonsense character, like, this place is great. And then she goes and she delivers her soliloquy about looking a little bit deeper, and they're whipping the things. I'm just kind of like, why are we here? Like, nothing about this is, like, it feels simultaneously divorced from everything that's satisfying that's going on in the story. And it's holding us away from, it's keeping us away from things we actually want to see, while simultaneously not delivering us anything that we want to be seeing.
Right, and that was another thing. Another like overarching feeling that I had after this movie was there were plot points and stories that I wish we had spent way more time on and would have gotten deeper into. And again, it's weird because like, I don't want to handcuff my experience of the new Star Wars movies by constantly comparing them to what it was like watching Star Wars as a kid or watching the prequels as a kid. Like, I don't want to have that always be the comparison, but given what The Force Awakens was, you're kind of expecting here's going to be like the shell or skeleton of something like Empire or Jedi, and some answers. And then, like, one of the things that was so intriguing in Empire was we kind of learned a little bit more about the Force. And, it's not like saying, we have to take it super seriously, because Yoda was a fucking goofball. Like, he was a weird-ass fucking character in both Empire and Jedi.
All right. Any arguments you guys have, can we all agree that Yoda was way more Yoda
in
Puppet
this movie?
Puppet
was
Yoda
great.
With the dialogue and everything was way more Yoda than any bit of Yoda in the prequels.
Agreed.
Period.
Yep,
I think he was super Yoda-y.
His upper lip was a little small, but other than that, yeah, for sure.
They had to CGI the mustache out. But the thing was, like, I wish that there was more time spent with Luke and Rey, and with more specifically with Rey and Kylo Ren. That connection that they had, they
was
did
awesome.
such a good job of building that relationship over like 3 scenes.
By the way, I want to hold on. I want to just real quick. I want to wrap up one idea and then move on to the Rey and Kylo thing, because there's something about that I really like. But the one thing I want to touch on real quick is about the discourse surrounding the film right now. Is that it seems that the I feel it feels wrong-headed at both ends. The negative criticism, I think, are people who, like, again, as I've said up to this point, feel that there's something wrong, but can't actually understand what's wrong, so they latch onto a bunch of superficial bullshit. So it's like, I didn't like that Luke was this, or this didn't feel like Star Wars, or whatever it is, and I don't really agree with any of that. And then, but however, I feel like the positive, all the kind of positive reviews that are being written are speaking very specifically to the film's intentions, which are easy to see. Like, the film's intentions are there, but there's, again, a gap between an intent and actually that intent being executed well in a movie and actually pulling something off. Because, for instance, this is an extreme example, but I've read and watched plenty of recent defenses of Batman versus Superman, which talk all about the lofty intentions of Batman versus Superman, saying, like, don't you get it? Like, Batman represents this, and it's about, and how it parallels our current political this, and it's supposed to be.
Zack Snyder had a fucking.
It's this tragic structure of blah blah blah, and I'm like, and then they point, they basically they name the intention. And then they point to evidence that intention is present in Batman versus Superman, and then they use the fact that there is a correspondence between their identification of that intention and evidence of that intention's existence as confirmation that intention was achieved. But the fact is, and this is, again, extreme example, but this is the same thing I'm reading in a lot of Star Wars, there's a lot of criticism surrounding Star Wars, The Last Jedi, is that they're identifying an intention thematically, then they're pointing at evidence that intention is present, and then they're using the fact that there's evidence of that intention being present as essentially confirmation that intention was achieved. And like, no, I'm sorry, that's not how art works.
Yeah, and this is speaking to that broader point here, there's no more dangerous way to interpret anything than to try to divine the artist's intent and then judge it that way. Because as an artist who's actually tried to make art on a couple of occasions, not good, but you go in to make a piece of art with intentions, and there's an open question once it's made if those intentions are realized. The audience tells you if the intentions are realized in the theater. I intended this to be a comedy, these to be laughs. If in the theater the audience isn't laughing, that is a failed intention. The worst thing you could do in terms of interpreting art is look at the intent. Oh, I see that he intended this to be a joke, therefore I will interpret this as funny. Doesn't work that way. In fact, there's almost
you get no points for intending it to be funny.
There's no more dangerous diversion in artistic interpretation, period, than trying to divine the artist's intentions as opposed to what was actually achieved in the work of art as it comes through, as the audience reacts to it, as people generally, as your general intelligent normal moviegoer, say for a movie, if the intention is for it to be funny, if there are no laughs, that is a fail. That is an epic fail, as the internet says, in terms of intentions, and that's the truth. The truth is, it's not funny. Because the audience says it's not funny.
Right.
Yes, and
this is a democratic process.
But the other thing is, like, or to put it more succinctly, the proof is in the pudding, and that, like, if in any way any of these themes that people seem to be latching on to were successfully achieved, then I should be kind of awash and vibrating with those themes when the film ends. Very much obvious example being the original trilogy. When those films finish, its ideas and its drama are kind of resonating on this same frequency as your soul when the film ends, and that's just not present in this film.
Well, but that's the thing I find interesting, though. It's like, it's not present in you. When I left this movie, and having read none of these defenses, having seen nothing, having known nothing, I felt a deep resonating feeling in my soul. And I did. I really did. I mean, like, flat out go ahead and ask. I mean, this is probably the wrong person to reference in this podcast here, but Paul, our resident Star Wars, giant nerd.
Yeah. Apologist.
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Seriously, Daniel.
Please
Daniel, your I think that your reaction is completely valid. I don't question why anyone would have that kind of reaction. I'm merely taking the position that I think, and this will either bear out or it won't. Over time, collectively, our response to this film is going to drift towards indifference rather than drift towards greater appreciation.
Right.
In very much the same way it did with Force Awakens. And maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, maybe
Well,
I'm an asshole.
I-
That is my prediction.
Sure. And I actually, it's funny because like this is the conversation that I've had with other people like about the same deal. It's like, I feel the opposite way about it. I really do think that it's going to be appreciated further as we move along, because I think people are going to come around to it.
Yeah.
And one of the things I found interesting, and I'm not directly comparing this to Empire, by the way, but one of the things that is very, very interesting is going back, people have been dredging up the reviews for Empire, which is obviously widely regarded to be the best Star Wars movie, blah, 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 blah. No one fucking liked it looks like, when it first came out. Like, it's a thing that's like, and then what is this? And it's just an empty chapter in a thing that I guess goes on forever. Like, literally, there are reviews that, like, just completely trash this movie, like, in a way that is, like, honestly kind of astounding.
I guess
I'm not saying this will be widely regarded as a masterpiece later on. I love it. I really, really do love it. It's a movie that I have not been able to stop thinking about and talking about for the past, almost a week.
Yeah, I mean, me neither, but not for the same reasons, unfortunately.
Just to change the gears here, things I liked. I want to touch on real quick.
Hyperdrive cannon.
Yes,
Kamikaze hyperdrive.
Let me put that. Can we put a pin in that for just 1 second? Because I know I'm going to lose track of this if I don't say it now. One thing that I'm legitimately shocked that they got away with putting into this film in this day and age, like, legitimately baffles me and delights me, is the fact that Rey and Kylo Ren were able to have their force connection with one another, and they communicated that visually with just a shot and reverse shot of them talking to each other in different locations. Because it's very simple. It's actually how that same idea is kind of teased, which is probably how they justified it, was consistency, when that same thing kind of happens at the end in Jedi, when Luke and Vader kind of connect with one another. But considering that we live in this world where especially with $200 million blockbusters, especially Harry Potter for me is like the arch example of this, where anything that's even any kind of nebulous reality or slight hint at magical stuff is immediately awash in this kind of slop trough of smoke and particles and CGI and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. I mean, perfect example, when in Force Awakens, when Rey touches that lightsaber. And by the way, remember that in that movie that where nothing is fucking significant? She touches a lightsaber and then immediately falls into like a world of smoke and particles and blackness. And she's seeing things, which interestingly I revisited the other day.
Has
and
nothing to do
no relevance.
with what happened.
But, it was a really important moment between her and Maz Kanata, or whoever the fuck that character was. Anyway, sorry. But the fact that in this, because that Rian Johnson, and all props to him for being able to hold on to this, when he's like, well, she's going to force talk to him, like the 450 person CGI
Animation
crew was
department.
like, cool, perfect. We're going to need a lot of fucking smoke, and then they're going to be in the same room, and there's going to be glowy shit, and we're going to do like a fucking 900 degree fucking dolly shot that never could happen as she swirls into space and she's floating there, and his face is just ripples of fucking particles and things they're in this force space. That's my proposal for what the force space is going to look like. And he's like, shot? Reverse shot. I'm like, okay, that's fine, but we gotta put a weird fucking filter on everything. So I get that it's a shot, reverse shot, but there's gonna be fucking things coming in from the edge and electricity, and the Flash is gonna look at a thing and sparkles are gonna come off it. And he's like, shot, reverse shot, and that someone, and I actually delighted thinking about this, someone on the special effects team had a fucking conniption fit, who's just like, no one's gonna fucking, there's no shit things. They're not gonna get
You
it.
have to inform the audience.
Pause this real quick. I actually do. I think I figured out the real theme of this movie. It is people saying to Rian Johnson, "Hey, do this thing," and he just goes, "No."
Yeah. Well, to look at where this movie took the story, right? Okay, so if you look at what Empire did to right after A New Hope. Right, it's kind of like this dark middle chapter. You learn about Luke's connection to Vader. You learn about a little bit of what the Jedi Knights were at some point in the past. You learn about the Force. You see this so all this shit happens, right? The world of Star Wars is much deeper and more nefarious, and people are being leaned on to turn on their friends. There's a lot going on in Empire. What this movie does for The Force Awakens and whatever this trilogy is going to be called, the sequel trilogy? I don't understand. What is this trilogy called?
It'll be called the Cash Grab
The Forgotten Trilogy. The Forgotten Trilogy is essentially Rian Johnson going like, wow, here's a list of 11 questions that mysteries that J.J. Abrams left for us. Well, I mean, not going to answer that one. That's fucking stupid.
It's actually it's not a list. It's actually like so Rian Johnson on day one of writing the screenplay, he's sitting in his office. And then he gets a knock on the door. And he opens the door, and then just 11 boxes come in. And he opens each individual box. One's labeled Emperor Snoopsy Poo. The other's labeled Ray's Parents. He opens up the boxes, and they're just empty.
Yes.
What would you call these boxes? What are they called?
I don't know. Them? Like riddle boxes?
Sounds good.
Anyway,
I wish he had opened the box that had a request to write a good movie in it.
Yeah, how about that one?
He left that one completely unopened.
There were a lot of really good things about the movie. The Rey and Kylo Ren connection was really awesome.
And yes, the kamikaze hyperdrive.
Kamikaze hyperdrive was awesome. Yeah. Although the Rey Kylo Ren connection they tried to explain it away as something that Snoke was doing, and then at the very end of the movie they still have that same connections, and Snoke is dead.
Well,
so
we can assume that once they're in physical proximity, it's better. Snoke had to astrally project them for all that distance, but when they're standing right next to each other, it's enough of a connection.
Yeah, but they weren't standing right next to each other at the end of the movie.
Think of it as
she was on the Millennium Falcon,
was
on literally the same planet.
After the connection is established,
all right,
then it's
just
stronger.
fucking whatever.
Seriously, no. Think of it this way. All right, at the end of Empire, when Luke's dangling off of the thing, is Leia standing right next to him?
No.
Okay, cool.
But there's an explanation as to why they have that connection.
Yeah,
but here's anyway. It doesn't. Who gives a shit?
Either way,
really, guys. It just who fucking
fuck
cares?
you, Kyle.
This
is the type of arguments I want.
I'm already falling asleep.
Secondarily, what the hell happened in this movie that wasn't a mirror of something that had happened previously? Like, I get it. They had to just kind of we have to get rid of all of the major players from the previous movies because this is about a new generation. That's cool. I mean, that's fine. They killed off all the characters that have living actors and left living the only character who has a dead actor.
Yes.
And also in the meantime sloppily handled that entire process. Had ample opportunities to remove Leia in a honorable I mean, other than the two obvious ones to me would be just having Poe shoot her in the head for some reason.
Yeah,
but her Mary Poppins moment, that's cool. Like I can envision that being a thing, I guess.
Yeah. But or really,
maybe she should have.
I just say if I were Laura Dern, I would have said, "Listen, you're right. Someone does need to stay behind on this ship. Someone needs. One of us is clearly older than the other. Really, anyone could have stayed behind. And by speaking of this just being a clumsily written script, and I don't give a shit in general, but there's just no world in which that moment passes. Someone has to stay behind on the ship. Really, the ship can't do that itself? Okay, fine. I'll grant you. Someone needs to stay behind. You're right. We should have one of our highest and best generals stay behind on the suicide ship. Really, couldn't anyone have done it?
There are 9 of us left.
Yeah.
So I'll just have the highest ranking person.
The highest ranking person.
What else could
Our
possibly
brilliant military leader needs to stay behind. And
Our brilliant military leader, by the way, who can't fucking communicate with her subordinates to even any sort of degree in order to stop the entirety of her fucking movement being decimated.
She literally could have explained it at any time. Like
30 seconds of saying no.
I would have really. You know what would have been a great moment to do that? When he pulled a gun on her. But instead, you're right. Be arrested instead.
And then at the end of it, they have the fucking audacity for Laura Dern and Leia to look at each other and say, "I like him. He's got a lot of spunk. He's got a lot of kick in him." And it's like, listen, dude, he just killed 97% of the fucking resistance single-handedly.
Yes. But
you promoted him.
Yes.
Congratulations, Poe.
But that's the thing. It's like that's when I say that that's the perfect thing. It's like you see the thread there of a conflict between the hot-headed Poe Dameron and the superior officer. And then ultimately he learns some lessons about, and they have the whole weird theme going on the whole time with his character about how it's better to just keep moving away from conflict than to actually engage in conflict. It's like it's better. It's all about what we save versus what
permission to shoot things.
Which, by the way, that theme just is really odd and doesn't make any sense. And but anyway, so it's just a separate thing. That's what I mean. It's like that type of thread we've seen before in other movies. That's fine. And that's when I say this feels like a first draft. It feels like they wrote a conflict between Poe Dameron and this purple-haired general lady, and first drafts are generally like that. They have the shape. They have the shape of the story you want to tell. But then when you actually start pushing against them, you're like, actually, that moment doesn't make sense. This doesn't. This actually is kind of slapped together.
And there's 30 extra pages.
Yes, but then upon subsequent rewrites, you would refine that to a point where it actually made sense. Like to where the intentions of both characters were clear, why she wasn't telling him wasn't clear, so that it would actually be the thing they wanted it to be. And it's not really an issue of plot holes or a bit nitpicking, but it's instead that it would have been the thing they intended. So you can see the intention, it's just that the intention failed in its execution. And of course it did, because the script was written in 6 weeks.
I guess another part of it, another question that I kind of had was, what was the main story?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I felt like every bit that I wanted to be the main story had less time than what I consider to be like the side, like the B plots. I thought the Poe thing was a B plot. I thought the Finn and Rose thing was B plot, and yet I feel like they had way more time.
Enough to Empire, where there's multiple plots going on simultaneously.
I'll say, what is
the
main plot? Yeah, what is the main plot in Empire?
Luke goes off to get his Jedi training and then goes off to save his friends.
You forgot Cloud City.
Yep.
That he went to go off to save his friends.
No, but I agree. I didn't forget Cloud City, but clearly the Luke plot is the main plot.
And that's the thing. Like, I expected Rey to be the main character of this movie, and what I feel like I got was like,
to not really even get into it, but just the fact that
not
and the reason I don't want to get into this argument is because it feels like it airs too closely to a lot of the criticism that's out there, which is I didn't like how that Luke that this is where Luke Skywalker ended up or that he died or whatever the things are. But it's like but the entire Rey and Luke plot was shitty.
Yeah,
it's like it was shitty just in the sense that it was nothing. It essentially amounted to nothing. It meant nothing. It felt like nothing, and it culminated with nothing.
My expectations going into the movie were kind of, the general sort of like structure of what we saw was similar to what I was expecting to see happen. I was expecting kind of like a homage, a rhyme of Empire and Jedi, right? I was expecting like, Luke is going to be the curmudgeonly old Jedi master teaching a new upstart who doesn't understand the Force at all. Like, I expected that. I expected, there's going to be some sort of showdown where Snoke and his relationship to these characters and why he exists is explained. I got part of that right. So like, and I get and I respect his, Rian Johnson was just basically like, hey, you know what, guys? J.J. Abrams didn't really know or give a shit about who Snoke could have been, and neither will I. So we're not going to have to worry about it anymore. Like, this is now handled. There's a button on this. There's going to be some comic book that comes out, 3 years from now that explains Snoke was just like some...
3 years from now? Try 2 weeks
from now. 2 weeks from now that explains who Snoke was and why Luke Skywalker knew who he was.
It literally comes...
to stop him from fucking corrupting.
It literally comes in another box that just says, all right, you fucking nerds.
Yeah, either way, I think it all comes down to this: the Thrawn trilogy would have been a much fucking better episode 7, 8, and 9.
I have no idea what that is. I'm assuming it's books.
Yes, of course it's books, and of course it's fucking awesome.
Okay. By the way, here's a funny. Here's something fun. Yeah, you want to know how well thought out the next episode is going to be? I just read an article this morning titled, or this morning.
Oh, right. J.J. Abrams pitches.
J.J. Abrams pitches episode, the third part to Disney.
Well, that's exactly how it felt watching this movie. It felt like J.J. Abrams
it felt like someone saw Force Awakens and then was told
to write a movie.
To write a fucking movie.
And then it now feels like someone saw The Last Jedi and was like, "Hey, you get to write the next movie."
Which in principle is, I suppose, not necessarily a bad thing. However, if the script feels like just warm batter when you're done, and it doesn't feel like it's in any way a completed screenplay that makes fucking sense, or makes sense is the wrong word, that has any effect whatsoever on the audience beyond what they bring to it, then then why are we doing this?
Yeah, there's that. There's also the fact that...
It's like, he shouldn't be pitching it now. He should be pitching episode 9 2 years ago.
Yes.
And so he'd have 2 years to write the goddamn script.
Exactly. It's like,
they had
the rushed nature of the thing is yet more rushed now. They pushed back the release date a little bit, but whatever the issues of both Force Awakens and this being first drafts, half-baked, is going to be quadruply true now, especially now that there's not really any specific threads to pick up on after The Last Jedi.
This next movie can go literally anywhere.
You don't understand. Like, they had to have Colin Trevorrow briefly come in and go, but then there's a dinosaur in a helicopter.
Oh, man. I'm so grateful that Colin Trevorrow is not involved in episode 9. I mean, can you imagine if this was a good movie and episode 9 was Colin Trevorrow?
From what I heard, there is, he wrote shit. He wrote shit for this movie.
God damn it.
I want that to leak so badly.
Yeah.
So bad. I want to see what the shape of the Colin Trevorrow version of this is.
I'm doing my best to, again, remove here's my love of these characters and my expectation of where I want them to go to where this movie went. Because that's fine. There's so many different places the characters can go. But just boiling it down to the movie, I feel like I could watch Empire a dozen times a month and never get tired of it.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I could just constantly watch it and see something new or interesting or something that like continues affirming my love of that movie. I don't know if I'll see this movie again for a while.
I think Empire is an unfair comparison because you're essentially comparing it to like one of the greatest screenplays of one of the greatest films ever made. I would say I don't like. Let's look at instead, and we bring it up just because it's an easily accessible thing. Like, I will not revisit this film as much as I will revisit Spider-Man Homecoming. Like, Spider-Man Homecoming is a film that has been enriched upon further viewings, and I actually get how its themes tie to its characters and its plot, and it makes sense, and I enjoy it.
So you're saying I should see it?
You should probably see it.
Someone should probably buy Armin a Blu-ray copy of Spider-Man Homecoming for Christmas.
I will return to that film far more than I will return to
this. Another thing is like, I didn't like the way that like I can kind of see beyond the veil of this production. You mentioned like, oh, you kind of wanted to go into this not knowing that they fucking wrote this movie in 6 weeks after watching The Force Awakens, right? Yeah. And I didn't like the way that after watching the Force Awakens, my main issues with The Force Awakens weren't, it's a retread of A New Hope. It wasn't, none of that really bothered me. What bothered me was we were basically given the prototype, the frame of a story that has taken place over the past 30 years in between episode 6 and episode 7. Like we're given this like, hey, this exists. And then my expectation going into, which I guess was flawed, going into episode 8 and now going into episode 9, is that framework was thought out, like, bulletproof and led somewhere that made sense. And now what I'm realizing is that there was no framework. There was no thinking it out. It's definitely not bulletproof. And while it will, I guess, in the end make sense after we've seen episode 9, it isn't something that is like, here's an actual
It's not going to make
overarching
sense after
story.
we've seen episode 9.
Yeah.
Because Rian Johnson, I keep saying Rian.
It's
Apparently
Ryan.
it's the right way. It's pronounced as Ryan, but he shouldn't spell his name so stupid if he wants it pronounced right. Anyway, yeah, I mean, he said when he some interview like more than a year ago, that when he talked to JJ and Lawrence Kasdan about what their plans were for the trilogy, he assumed that there was an overarching plan for the trilogy, and was surprised to find that there wasn't.
Yeah.
So that was his, and there isn't a plan for how to finish from here.
But that's the thing is, not even necessarily a bad thing. But if someone has 6 weeks to write a screenplay or whatever, if right now J.J. Abrams is getting started writing a screenplay for a movie that's going to come out, that's going to actually be released in theaters, in 20 months, that's a problem. And that's the problem with Last Jedi, is that you can feel surging through every scene in that movie, the fact that it was written real fucking fast, and it feels like the sketch, the outline for maybe a movie that could have been good if it had had time to be written. And so that's where the problem is that we're having right now, I think, is just a lot of people, is you have the people who are predisposed to liking it, who are saying, like, I identify the intentions and they're admirable, therefore it is a good movie, and you have the people who were predisposed to not liking it or didn't like it, who were like, I don't like that there were tuxedos or that there was Luke Skywalker died or whatever it is. And neither one of them is valid. What we're ultimately going to get, though, is a film that is just not effective, and because it's not effective, will be forgotten.
And here is the best analogy. It's actually not even an analogy. It's more or less directly, but what a lot of The Force Awakens is in terms of its setups that don't pay off. It's like, when you are trying to write a new screenplay, for any of you folks who've tried to do that, and you have a vague outline, kind of, sort of, and then start writing on page 1, you end up putting in a lot of setups in the first act that you intend to figure out how to pay off later. But then by the time you get to the end of Act 3, it's like, oh, shit, all those setups in the first act don't actually, were kind of worthless, so I need to go back and change it. This is as if someone was starting to write a 3-act screenplay on page 1, got to the finish of Act 1, shot it, and now handed someone else.
Released it as a billion-dollar movie.
And handed it to someone else to pick up on Act 2.
What is that called? Later. What is that called? Magnificent Corpse? Is that what that's called when writers pick up stories after the thing?
Oh, yeah, something like that.
Anyway, so we're gonna get
the Talisman.
Yes, there you go. Yeah,
there's a whole lot of that happening. I don't understand why this had to be numbered the same way that the other movies were. Like this movie hasn't. Neither of these movies so far really have anything to do.
Well, because this is the continuation of the Luke Skywalker story, but that's what I'm saying, is that this is all you're gonna get. This is it. This is it. But what we are going to get
right now.
But what we are going to get, I like what you're doing. But what we are going to get is a whole new trilogy from Rian Johnson. So what we can expect.
God, I hope he actually writes an actual outline.
Yeah, I hope. Well, unfortunately, since he just pitched it to them, he has to turn in his final draft for the screenplay and begin pre-production in 2.5 weeks. So for the entire trilogy,
going to shoot all three at the same time.
They never planned that far ahead. But what can we expect from a Rian Johnson trilogy? It's going to have
the kid,
many plots.
It's going to have the kid that can pull the broom. It's going to have that right. Kid.
Yeah. Oh my God. And that's the other thing, is that just, what that reminds me of? It reminds me of M. Night Shyamalan's Signs. And here's why. Signs is and this kind of happened with a lot of with his films prior to that, but it was more obscured. Signs is, he wrote a really wonderful thriller. M. Night Shyamalan wrote a really wonderful thriller about crop circles. But at that time, M. Night Shyamalan was clearly still fancying himself as the new Steven Spielberg, because that was the comparison that a lot of people were drawing and kind of putting onto him around that time. And so he thought, what Spielberg movies have? Themes, and like really resonant human themes that kind of give an emotional punch at the end of the movie. And by the way, I like Signs. I want to put this is not like just me shitting all over Signs.
I honestly think that might be his best movie.
Yeah, I really like Signs, but But here's the problem with Signs is after making this whole film about crop circles that's really cool and a really cool thriller about aliens and mystery and everything, he's like, but it needs that juice, that theme juice at the end.
Juice.
Yes, exactly. He needs that theme juice. So what he draws a superficial connection between the ideas of crop circles being signs and there being signs in the world that indicate that you should do like signs from heaven that tell you the future and that you have to have faith with it, which is in itself about faith. And so he makes the entire film about someone losing his faith and then regaining his faith, which again, in concept is not a bad idea, but it felt really, 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 really tacked on to the end of that movie, where you have this weird thriller that is about crop circles from space that are signs, and yet it's also about a man who's regaining his faith and seeing signs about the whatever, and and you can just see, what's bad is that you can see the connective tissue where you're just like, god damn it. That was really tacked on there. And that is kind of what the end of Last Jedi feels like to me. It's like it's essentially this, which is, you know what this thing needs? Some themes. Some themes. And so this whole being way overlauded right now thing about it being a meta narrative about Star Wars just sort of gets tacked on to the end because there's nowhere else to go to give the thing that texture of thematic resonance, because it's not coming from the characters, it's not coming from the drama, it's not coming from the actual story that's being told. And so we have to tack on this shitty shot at the end to talk about how, well, this really inspires kids in the way that Star Wars inspires kids, and in a way it's kind of like a meta-narrative about blah, 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 blah. And again, I can see the intention. It's just a cynical, shitty, slapdash intention that is poorly executed. And by the way, anyone else find it weird that kid was a cis white male?
I fucking hate you so much.
He was a white boy, and I think that sends a bad message, because this film was doing such a good job with representation. Why wasn't that kid a Latina girl?
Actually, the portrayal of Latinos in Star Wars so far is pretty negative. As Benicio del Toro is the only one, I think.
I know.
Is he the only
so
one?
Apparently they're all retarded.
And stutterers too. So Latinos and stutterers are both evil. That is the theme I took away from The Last Jedi, right?
That's the message.
Uh-huh.
Come on. Do better, Star Wars. #do better.
Me too, Star Wars.
We all know Rian Johnson doesn't have very long in Hollywood once that scandal comes out.
I watched The Force Awakens, and then I read the novelization, hoping to glean more details about where the story.
You read the novelization of Force Awakens?
I did.
What did it tell you about Maz Kanata?
Nothing, dude. Absolutely fucking nothing.
Really? Because she has a rich history in the world. She's run this watering hole for 1,000 years.
I really actually like the idea of, like, once again, another like UPS delivery. Like the author of the Force Awakens novelization, like, gives a little knock on the door, opens it up, sees the script, and goes, fuck.
Here, by the way, is the tough thing about novelizations, because is the novelization for The Last Jedi out?
No,
I think those are released pretty much the same time. I thought they were, but anyway, they're always based on the screenplays. And normally, there's enough of a lead time between a screenplay being done in a finished-ish form before the movie comes out that a novelization guy can actually write a coherent novel based on it. What would be the task of trying to novelize this, where it seemed like it was sort of making up as it went along, and production schedule was very short and all that? Because I actually read the novelization of, I probably said this on the podcast before, of Last Action Hero. Yeah. Just because that's the thing I did for some reason. But what's fun is that whole.
Let's revisit that just one more time. Cliff read the novelization for The Last Action Hero.
But there's whole sequences that were clearly added to the screenplay, and I can even diagnose who wrote the additional sequences there, like the whole Leo DeFart thing, the explosion of the gas, all that written by Shane Black, clearly, afterwards, which is not in the version of the screenplay that the novelization guy wrote. Anyway, yeah, what would be... I would like to see if there is a novelization release for The Last Jedi. Well, you should read it.
Imagine here's what's going to happen. A very, 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 very long and unnecessary explanation of the history of the two Asian sisters. That's what you're going to get.
That's a good point.
Yes, it's going to be a lot of that. Because you see, they were sisters, and you can tell.
Because they're Asian.
And by the way, of the two of those, why'd the hot one have to die fast?
Yeah, I know.
I know, it's kind of pissed me off. Yeah,
Me too, Cliff.
Yeah.
Listen, guys, it hurts. The more I think about it, the less happy I am about it. And
yeah. That being said, honestly, the opening sequence, just if I said revisiting the opening sequence, I did not mind at all. I actually was after it was done, the whole, including the whole chick dropping the bombs and dying, I was like, cool. I am on board so far. This feels different and exciting and cool, and I enjoyed the fact that it was able to very quickly invest me in a character and then kill that character. It felt a lot like, honestly, just like a lot of World War II movies where you momentarily get to know a character just to see that character die, so that you can feel kind of the breadth of the consequences of war and stuff. It felt like a good war movie sequence. As of that moment, I was 100% on board with I was seeing.
And then it picks up where Force Awakens left off with Rey handing Luke a lightsaber, seeing the pain in his eyes to just witness what this lightsaber is, and then he's like, fuck your expectations.
But by the way, that's something I don't. That's something I don't even have a problem with, because it's like, it's like I do and I don't, because it's a rebuke to something that is really fucking stupid about Force Awakens, which is the fact that lightsabers are not important. It's like when Cliff pointed out the fact that Force Awakens feels like a fucking fan script, like the fan script that was written for the Matrix.
Lightsabers are not important.
Because again, lightsabers. Real quick. Larger point, lightsabers are not important unless you are a fan writing fan scripts, and then Luke has to find his fucking lightsaber. That's what Force Awakens was. And I don't mind that they threw that.
General Kenobi.
I don't mind that they threw that away. But the problem with him throwing that away is that throughout the entire script, you could feel all these clumsy moments where it felt like the movie was trying to directly walk back criticisms of the first film. It's like when he throws the lightsaber over his shoulder, later on, when there was a lot of criticism, the worst one was, there was like all this criticism about, how is Kylo Ren is like this trained Force guy with a lightsaber, and yet Rey defeats him with a lightsaber. So, which obviously was just part of just the really clumsy and cynical, we made a girl the hero bit at the end of Force Awakens, which means no, you didn't make a girl the hero, because if you made the girl a hero, you would have made a girl who was an actual fucking hero instead of someone whose sex becomes central because it's all about a bait and switch. It's not the black guy. It's not the black guy. It's the girl who's the hero. Now everyone please pat us on the fucking back for that. What happens is there's this whole line where Snoke gives an explanation for why he lost.
Your emotions, you were overridden by your...
Remember when...
being torn by murdering you're weak. You're weak.
Remember when you killed your dad and it made you so weak that you ended up being defeated by that one girl who, just in case you guys didn't pick up on it, had never picked up a lightsaber before, and that's a relevant piece of information because we wanted to let you guys know this because...
Yeah, I did. Yeah, the one because one thing that he did correct at least was how overpowered Rey was in the first one. That Rian Johnson sort of went out of his way to make her in this movie a bit clumsier, a bit more of a fuck up than she was in the first one. So that's fine because you have nowhere else to go. If she's so much more powerful than Kylo Ren, who's she gonna fight? Yeah. So at least that's fun.
Well,
going forward,
they also kind of, if you're talking about the lightsaber being a symbol for something. I mean, there literally is an entire scene where Kylo Ren and Rey, whatever the fuck her last name is, are fighting over that lightsaber and trying to just get their hands on it. And it's just like,
at least
suddenly it's symbolic of Luke's, I don't know,
something. I don't know.
Here also, by the way, but that largely plays into the theme as articulate. There's the only theme that's justified by what we see that has actual articulation in the movie is Kylo Ren's articulation in the throne room scene about letting it go, burning away all the past, because because that actually happens in the story, and also that gives an indication of what a good or intriguing or interesting ending would have been, which is to end there.
Yeah.
Well, the movie there, we very briefly talked about some of the good things the movie did, and some of the things that the movie did that I really fucking loved were that entire throne room scene was fan-fucking-tastic, and you can tell there was a lot more work that went into making that super fucking airtight than I feel like a lot of the rest of the movie, because some of it almost feels like you're mentioning Kylo Ren is basically talking to the audience, saying, "Hey, motherfuckers, let this shit go." Yeah. And to the point where even Snoke early on is like, "You can ascend onto, becoming the next Vader," and that's basically what all the fanboys wanted. They were like, "Make Kylo Ren the next Vader," and now even Snoke is like, "You can be the next Vader," and Kylo's like, "Hey, bud, suck on these double guns, motherfucker," and like it just like. The sort of the message there was very much, we're not falling into your expectations. Even Luke says it, this is not going to go how you expect it to, even though for some reason he's cut off from the Force, so there's really no way for him to know whether she expects it to go one direction or how it's actually going to go.
Just supposed to be.
But anyway,
by that point he's totally like using the Force.
He's totally not. He definitely was not by that point.
Do you remember the?
But
the
either way,
God, who cares?
The stuff that happened there was super fucking cool. Where like. This whole idea of Kylo Ren turning on Snoke and then they together fight the I don't know, the Praetorians,
for example,
not the Knights of Ren, by the way, who don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, who are the red guys? Fuck it, I don't care.
The entire movie.
Here's what.
By the way, the red guys were cool. I'll say that
they were cool.
To add, if we didn't touch on that before, I love the red throne room. I love that big red curtain. I love that. And again, it's a good example of of something Force Awakens didn't do, which was if you're going to, and I know that there were red Imperial Guards in the original series, but at least it looked new. Yeah. It looked different than other things that I've seen before.
There were some really beautiful shots, like the close-up of Kylo Ren's lightsaber against that red background on like the really reflective black surface. That was really pretty. Like I feel that was really pretty, and it resonates with me as a pretty thing. But also, the entire fucking plan of like sneaking your little like escape pods off of your ship to go to this planet. And the idea is like, oh, they won't be able to sense the escape pods, but then they burn the curtains down and they literally watch through the windows of them blowing up the escape pods. So I don't understand.
Was that just like a magnifying glass?
Yeah, it was literally a magnifying glass. He was like, look, I know about these escape pods and I'm blowing them up right now. It's like, wait a second, we spent an hour and 40 minutes of this movie trying to build up to these escape pods leaving.
Like home goods store where you buy like giant globes and
Michael's? Or actual home goods. That's maybe that's
the thing. Yeah, it feels like Pier 1 or something like that. Like Snoopsy Poo.
I'm looking for a magnifying glass.
Snoopsy Poo just walks in his robe, which is like slightly untied.
He's like shuffling in his little like slides.
I need a magnifying glass.
This one's pretty big, but I would like one that's slightly bigger.
Yes, ruined my magnifying.
Yes, I am interested in the Pier 1 rewards card. I have a feeling I will need another magnifying glass.
Do I get the 15% off of this purchase or my next
This is pretty fingerprinty. Could I use like Windex on this?
You will
Would
give
that be
me
cool?
15% off.
So wait.
Not the credit
And scene. All right, guys, we did it.
Anyway, the ending that should have been more interesting is she takes Kylo's hand to rule together in some capacity with a new Is he good? Is he bad? And maybe don't kill off all the rebels, because otherwise, what characters do you have going on to sequel then?
Well, we have Leia left, so
that would have been Anyway, whatever.
By the way, the other thing that's funny about this is that there has been a chastity to the connection of Kylo Ren and Rey in everyone's mind as a direct result of the fact that we kind of all collectively assumed that there was going to be some familial connection between the two of them.
Yeah.
So
they
now that they're not, it's like
she's acknowledged his pecs.
Exactly.
Yes.
So it's like, so now do they fuck? What happens?
You know, talking about expectations, and I know again this is not what this is about, but I would have loved to see, in a perfect world, if any of this was fucking thought out in advance of it being created, I would have loved to see that throne room scene basically turn into, because Rey was setting up the entire movie, I'm looking for my place. Like, I'm looking for someone to show me my place, show me what I can do, what this all means. If there was even an ounce of, there was something that meant something there. If Snoke had somehow revealed a connection between herself and him and like what she meant and why she was thing, and suddenly Kylo Ren is like, I'm gonna fucking kill Snoke because he's being a dick to me. You're not my real dad. And then he cuts Snoke in half, and Kylo Ren becomes the good guy. Rey turns to be the bad guy. That would have been
even more
fucking
interesting.
great.
Yes.
Like, oh fuck, episode 9. Who knew what the hell was gonna happen?
Yeah.
Why is this a thing? And then that would have been really fucking cool. I would have loved to see that. Instead,
Just goes back to normsies.
Yeah.
Instead, we're literally left where we were.
We literally move on to like a whole nother sequence that basically obeys all of the preconditions that had been that existed up to that point. It's like not only are we left to know that things are going to return to stasis, but then we just get to see a whole Planet Hoth sequence
It's salt, fucker. It's not Hoth.
It's just Hoth.
It's salt.
We get to see a whole Planet Hoth sequence in which it's like, see, this is pretty much what it's going to look like. You guys, the bad guys are still the bad guys. The good guys are still the good guys.
Oh, by the way, what was also fun with the walkers there is you knew the new walkers were bigger because they had one walker from Hoth right next to them for scale. So those
good.
were bigger walkers.
Yeah.
This was the Death Star, and this is Starkiller Base. Remember when they did that?
I remember they did that.
Yeah.
Anyone else still like bristle whenever they hear Star Killer Base?
Yeah, it's stupid.
It's like, guys. All right, so I don't know if you know this, but like in the original draft, he was Luke's Star Killer, and that's pretty cool, right?
And Death Star, Star Killer, Star Murder Base,
Darth Erderer,
Starbortion Base.
Oh yeah, Starbortion. By the way, guys,
we're gonna abort the fuck out of this star.
If the motherfucker is Star Killer Base, why didn't they actually make it live up to its name?
And kill a star?
Kill a star. The star explodes, destroys all the planets in a given system.
Yep.
That's a use for it being bigger.
Don't you understand? It kills the star it's currently orbiting by sucking its energy in, and then when you destroy the planet.
Speaking of something, by the way, that
it creates another star exactly the same size where the planet was, which doesn't at all disrupt the orbits
by the
of
way,
the planets.
I saw that movie. I saw that movie like twice in theaters, and again, I didn't pick up on that until I watched it 2 days ago, and they were like, "It's probably." Because I literally went to the kitchen to get like a Topo Chico and like came back, and then I was like standing and they were like, and it draws all the energy out of the star, and when it's loaded it'll be ready to kill, and I was like, was this always on the fucking movie?
No, it's really fucking funny. No, because like seriously, I saw the movie in the theater, I think at least 2-3 times, something like that. And on last Tuesday, when I watched it again to like prep for Last Jedi, I was like, same deal, like, wait, was that always a thing?
Was that there?
Was that like, that was a line?
It's like, it's a film that's actively making me not pay attention to it.
Well, I'm just gonna see if we can get Kai back in here now that he's avoided all the spoilers. I don't think there's anything else we can say about this that does not retread upon everything that we've talked about already, but I'm sure that we'll continue to talk about it as more details come out. Yeah. With like Rian Johnson was writing the script as he was shooting it. Okay, here comes Kai. We can't talk about this anymore. So in conclusion,
Luke Skywalker,
the fucking lightsaber.
In conclusion,
Kai's coming back. All right.
When they have sex with the porgs, it really threw me off. All right. Thank you very much, folks, for listening. Let's get everyone's social medias.
I am at Mr. Kyle Bogart on the best goddamn Instagram account on the internet.
True.
I am at Cliff Bogart on an Instagram account that I actually updated this week.
Ooh. And I am at a Supersonic Man on Instagram, Twitter, etc. And you're wrong, and you're wrong in different ways.
Yeah. That's fine. I'll take that.
Daniel is
And
disappointed in you.
Chase, yeah, that's
I am
that's
actually,
fine.
yeah.
You can
Deeply.
find Chase at Chase504. He's doing his Christmas stuff with his family. And I'm at Armin Hoist. Thank you so much, folks, for listening, and we'll catch you next week.
Later.
Maybe.